All right, so today I'm going to walk through project 1 with you guys, and potentially get you started on it, depending on how much time we have and what's going on. I know we pushed it back some. I do still need to change the due date because I think it still has the original due date on it. But since we're starting it a few days later than I intended to, we'll push the due date back a little bit. It is a lengthy project. If you notice from the screen here, it's 11 pages of a PDF. That's really deceptive because the reason it's so long is because there's a lot of directions in it. If you've looked at it or started it already, you'll notice that it's pretty step-by-step directions. Now, this assumes that you all had 1301 Java, so it's all this is not completely brand new to you. If it is, you might have to go back and refresh your memory from 1301 or ask me questions. Questions are always a good thing. Waiting till the night or the weekend it's due to ask me questions is not the right time to ask me questions. If you're in my online class, emailing me and setting up a Zoom call or Google Hangouts or something is always available, but you do have to do that. You guys in person, you can do that too if you don't want to come to in-person office hours. In-person office hours, if you forgot, are from 9:30 to 12, Monday through Thursday, and by appointment in the afternoons. Questions so far? All right, so those of you in the room will notice that I have a printed out copy of this because I'm old. I still print things. I take a pen and the papers and I make myself notes as I go through them. We're gonna try to do that, a little bit of that on the computer, but that's extremely blurry. So can you read that screen? You got yours popped up. Is that a little bit better? Make it a little bit bigger. I don't know. You need to tell ITS that my projector's blurry. So first thing I do every time before I start any project, whether it's a school project or a professional project when I'm working in the real world, is I read through the whole thing. I may not read it in minute detail, but I skim through the whole thing to get an idea of what I'm doing. Right? So this one's broken up into parts. The objective is to demonstrate is for you to demonstrate to me that you can refactor code, add data members or fields to classes, and create and interact with objects. So you're not really reinventing the wheel here. You're basically fixing somebody else's code and modifying somebody else's code. So I gave you a zip file to download. The project is broken into 3 parts. There will be some typos in this PDF. I saw them after I published it, so sorry. Part 1 is worth 74 points. If you get part 1 done, you're guaranteed yourself a C. Do not move on from part 1 until it's done and it works. Because if you read on, it's going to tell you that I'm not going to grade it, the other parts, if the first part doesn't work, because there's no point, right? Part 2 is more difficult than part 1. Part 3 is the most difficult part. Part 3 will not be graded if you do not earn 10 of the 14 points on part 2, because I'd rather you spend the time on part 2 than go and try to guess on part 3. Does that make sense? Here's some notes. The projects, if they don't compile, I'm not grading them. This is not first year Java. I shouldn't have to go fix compile problems. If it's not compiling a day or 2 before it's due, you need to email me and I'll help you fix it then. But if you turn it in not compiling, I'm not grading it. Part 1 You may not discuss the project with anyone else outside this class. However, you may receive help from part 1 on the CSX lab or the instructor. I'm going to modify that. You can talk to your classmates. I'm okay with you talking to your classmates as long as you're not copying each other's code. And you're like, oh, how will you ever know? I don't know. If I can catch high school students doing it, I can catch college students doing it. There's actually things that we can run that tell me how similar your code is to somebody else's. Parts 2 and 3 says you're only supposed to ask me. I probably will be your best help for part 2 and 3, but feel free to talk amongst yourselves. We're gonna, like I said, have some time in class to do this if you're in person. If you're online, please email me when you start having problems. Don't wait till the last minute. I do have a life outside of school too, so I don't check my email frequently over the weekend. Each part should be submitted in a separate exported zip archive. If only one submission is received, it will be graded for part 1 only. Why am I doing that? It makes it easier for me to go through and grade all of part 1. And then I can see who had all of part 2 turned in. And then I can see who has part 3. It's just easier for me to grade and get it back to you in a timely fashion. It also forces you to do this incrementally. If you have to zip it up after each part, then you have to think about each part individually. All right, part 1, getting started. It's really simple. We're going to download stuff. We're going to rename the project files. I gave you step-by-step instructions on how to do that. We're going to be playing with turtles. So if you remember, I did that little get starting the Java Eclipse thing where we play with turtles for a few minutes. So this is going to extend that. We're going to play with the turtles some more. You're going to overload some constructors. Going to change some fields. You're going to go to a different file and overload some more constructors. And then you're going to change methods, the turn right and turn left methods. Instead of having multiple methods to turn different amounts, you're going to make one that takes a number of degrees that it's going to turn right and left. So we're going to refactor it down to one really useful method instead of a bunch of very specific methods. We're going to specify the turtle's name. So the dual turtle really needs a name. So we'll keep track of the characteristics of the string and data. So I'll tell you how to modify code for that. Modify the summary stats output. Jump to start location instead of stepping there. So basically, we're just, for the first part, the whole of the first part is just modifying what the turtle already does, right? And it's pretty detailed instructions. So, trusty pen and paper gal that I am, I would go through and everywhere it says that I need to modify or add a field, I would go highlight. Right here, we're talking about a string field. So I need a field that's a string. I know that I need to go create that, right? In the dual turtle class, there are currently multiple methods. Turn left, refactor the code so there's only one. So I know that I'm going to take all the rest of them out. I'm going to go look at the ones that are there and figure out how to make one turn method, turn left, that takes a parameter of how far I'm turning. Right? Does that make sense? So like I said, paper and pencil will save you some time. There's some places where there's some specific things that are in here, like add add and complete the @param tags. I might underline that or highlight it to myself because sometimes I get so intense in my coding, I forget to go back and fix the comments. Right? Y'all done the parameters and the little comment blocks from 1301, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about? All right, questions on part 1. Part 2 is a little bit more difficult. I'm gonna make you think a little harder. So you're gonna move the drawing of a rectangle to the doodle turtle class. So we're going to change the location of some of the methods. The method is going to accept 2 parameters, one for the width and one for the height. It's one of those typos I was talking about. The method body should draw a rectangle with the specified dimensions. If you've been taking computer programming here, 1300 in Python, we taught you how to draw shapes with turtles. 1301, we taught you to draw shapes with turtles. So we're just drawing shapes with turtles again. No, nobody says you can't go back and look through your 1301 or your 1300 stuff and get some ideas. You're gonna draw a triangle. There's a little bit of geometry here. You do have to know that an equilateral triangle has all the internal angles are 60 degrees, right? The external angles are 120 degrees. Don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. So sometimes when you're telling your turtle to turn, he needs to turn the external amount, not the internal amount. Depends on which direction it's coming from. Does that make sense? So remember from geometry that if you have a straight line, the straight line has got a 180-degree arc, right? So calculate from that straight line over which way you need to turn. If you get stuck and hung up in the math, email me. I'm not teaching math, I'm teaching computer science. I'll give you the resources you need for the math if you need it, right? And then you're going to draw me a face. And it tells you what you need to draw me a face. And I even give you a little example of what a face might look like. Why am I making you draw me a face? Because I want you to practice using the methods you created. Creating objects, using those instances, making it work. That make sense? Part 3, we're going to add another turtle to it. So up to this point, we've actually been doing 2 turtles, a big turtle and a small turtle. And now you're going to add one more turtle. You're going to add some colors. Where the turtle, you know, is colorful and pretty. Huh? Yeah, that's 3. So 3 doesn't have as much direction. This is where you may have to go look up some stuff in the documentation files about how you change colors of the lines and things like that. This is where I put your thinking brains to use, and I have you, you know, do some research.
With my own part B, I can do a loop or like a for loop. Increase speed, modify the function. Yeah, that way.
Modify the functionality of the doodle turtle class so that every turtle starts off at a speed of 0.60, but for every 50 steps the turtle takes, its speeds increase. Yeah, that's probably going to be a loop because every time it counts to 50, you're going to go up. You need something to keep up with how many steps it's gone, right?
Would it be a for loop or like, yeah.
Well, all we've done so far is for loops. While loop doesn't really make sense because you're not actually counting. While loops aren't good for counting, they're good for comparisons. While something's true, I'm going to do this.
Okay.
So I would use a for loop because they're good for accumulating values. Does that make sense? I love the fact that you're thinking ahead. All right. So again, I don't want you to concentrate on part 2 and 3 until you've got all of part 1 going. So now that I've walked you through it, and I would spend a little, if it was me doing it, I'd spend a little bit more time, like I said, with my paper and pencil, and I'd be highlighting. And in the margins, I might even be making myself notes of I might need a field here. I might need a variable here, things like that, just to keep me on track. It also helps me manage my time. Once I've been through it and I've made notes, I can kind of go, oh, this is going to take more than 30 minutes. I probably shouldn't start it 2 hours before it's due, right? I wouldn't give you a week to work on something if I thought you could do it in one class period, right? So if we do that, I went ahead and downloaded the zip file. Do you guys remember how to do a zip file in Eclipse?
Yeah, that's right.
You have to import it. Yeah, that's okay. That's the reason I'm going to walk you through it real quick. So if you go to File, Import, you're going to do an existing project into Workspace, go Next, and then browse over to wherever you have it. Mine's currently in the Downloads folder because I haven't moved it anywhere. You might want to put it somewhere else because you might want to be able to find it. I often create, when I'm working on a project, make a project folder on my desktop just where it's easy to find. If you're like my husband and have 15,000 icons on your desktop, this might not be a good place to put it, but so once you do that, it should open it up over here. You can go into this and you can rename it by using refactor and rename it according to the project specifications. I usually want to see your projects have your first and your last name in them, because that way I have no question about whose it is. If everybody in class turned in project 1 as their file name, and you never anywhere inside the code put your name, I wouldn't know whose it was unless I was just paying attention when I download them. I'm gonna be honest with you, I download them all at once and I try to grade them in chunks because that way I'm fair. If I do everybody's part 1 at the same time, then I give everybody the same amount of partial credit. So you can rename it. I'm not going to rename mine right now because I just don't care. And this computer's going to erase it in a minute anyway. You have your source files with all the different individual files you need in here. Only modify the ones that are specified to be modified in the project description, because there are files in here that help it run that you don't need to touch. So stick with what you're told to modify. That makes sense. So that's how you get in here. I immediately would go ahead and, whoa, that's weird. Yeah. I would go ahead and run it just to make sure it does something before I get any further, just to make sure you don't have a corrupted download file or anything like that. So if you run it as is, you should get a teeny tiny turtle and a much larger turtle, and they should draw some boxes on the screen for you, right? And when you get tired of watching it, you just click the X and it will go away. The first direction we had, so I just did part 1 with you. I downloaded it. I showed you where to rename it at. I compiled and ran it. So part 1 is going to be set in the turtle top size. So the first thing you're going to do is go into Doodle Turtle and try to modify a constructor. So Doodle Turtle, right now it has the default constructor and some methods for the turtle, right? Yeah. So it knows how to pick its tail up and lower its tail down. It knows how to turn right 30 and right 90, left 30, left 90, step forward. decrease size, increase size. Has a method to, a private method that initializes default values, and then the constructor uses the default values, right? So we're going to ask you to make another constructor, because overload means that you have two with the same name but different parameters, right? I remember that. And this time, the constructor is going to have an empty body to start off with. You can complete the method specification for the new constructor. The default constructor method specification can be used as a model. The only difference will be that the get turtle size will equal the name of the size parameter instead of initial size. So it's telling you what's going to change, right? So you need a parameter, you need this one to take a parameter so you can specify how big the turtle is going to be. Instead of having the right now, the turtle grows using methods telling it to go up by 10 or down by 10. So we're going to make it where you can, the user can actually tell it how big it is. All right, so I got you started, and I'm tempted to do more with you, but I really want to see where you guys are programming wise coming into this, what you brought with you from your previous programming experience. So I'm going to let you work on this today and tomorrow, or today and Thursday in class, or if you're online this week, and we're going to revisit it next Tuesday and see how far you've gotten. And then I'm going to have it due probably next Thursday, once I see where you're at. If we come in on Tuesday and all of you are lost and you can show me good faith effort that you've actually done it, then we will backtrack and see where we need to pick up and refresh our Java education. Online students, please email me before next Tuesday if you are stuck on any part of part 1. I'd like to see all of part 1 done Tuesday when you get here. I'd be pleasantly surprised if it was. And then that would leave us next week to concentrate on 2 and 3, which are the harder parts. All right, so that is it for today as far as me talking and recording. If you guys want to use the rest of the time to work on stuff, I will answer questions. If you run into anything outside of class, please email me. Don't expect an answer if you email me after 8 p.m. Monday through Sunday, I am not checking my email after 8 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, I check my email usually once a day. Holiday weekends, less than that.